Hey everyone, I'm Sam Gross with electricbikereport.com, and today we are taking a look at Ride1UP's Roadster V2. This is a really awesome, budget-priced commuter bike that honestly we've kind of fallen in love with. This bike comes in right at about the $1,000 entry-level price point, and for that money you're getting quite a lot. It's got a 350-watt rear hub motor that does a really surprisingly well job of getting you up to speed and flattening the hills. It's powered by a very discreet 252 watt-hour battery that's hidden in the down tube. And it also has the kind of cool feature, especially at this $1,000 price point, of having a belt drive. The belt drive is going to have very low maintenance, and it's also going to have the added benefit of not being greasy, so you can ride it with your pant leg down instead of having to roll it up. So today we're going to take a closer look at the Ride1UP Roadster's specs and also put it through a handful of tests. So let's see how this thing does. So at the first glance, one of the easiest things to notice about the Roadster is its relative aggressive geometry. I'm 6'1", this is a size large, 58 centimeter frame, and you're gonna see that the seat on this bike is higher than the handlebars for me. What that's going to do is it's going to put your body in a forward, really efficient pedaling position. The Roadster takes a lot of its styling cues from fixie and messenger culture that's been really popular on some of the urban centers in the United States. Think New York City, San Francisco, Los Angeles, places like that. In that culture, you see a lot of bikes that have very narrow handlebars for darting in and out of traffic, avoiding cars, avoiding pedestrians, things like that. And on this bike, they spec'd it with 550mm wide bars. These were a little on the narrow side for some of our testers. We found it made the bike a little bit twitchy, sometimes uncomfortable when you're standing. So some wider bars in the future might be something to consider. The Roadster's drive system is centered around a 350-watt geared hub motor laced into the rear wheel. That motor's done a really spectacular job, even for its relatively small size, of powering even our larger test riders up big hills and accelerating the bike up to speed. That motor is powered by a 32-volt, 7-amp-hour, 252-watt-hour battery that's really nicely hidden in the down tube. One of the benefits of speccing this bike with a slightly smaller hub motor and a smaller battery was it made it very light. It's only 33 pounds, which is way on the low end for e-bikes. And tying it all together on the handlebars is this really, really small, discreet display that, for its size, does a really nice job of telling speed, trip, miles, and allowing you to control which power assist level you're in. Another thing to note on this bike that's pretty cool is the belt drive system. That belt drive is turning a 64-tooth chainring in the front, 20-tooth in the back. It's a fairly large gear, but the 350-watt motor does a nice job of getting you up to speed, carrying you up hills. The saddle is, again, a performance saddle just to match the performance geometry of the rest of the bike. It's got a slit in the middle for comfort, it's nice and cushy, it's gonna do a nice job of keeping you comfy. The Roadster's braking is handled by a pair of Tektro caliper-style rim brakes. We'll dive a little bit deeper into how these brakes do in the real world later in the video, but in my experience, the calipers have done a great job of slowing this relatively lightweight e-bike down. In EBR's opinion, we really like to see a lot of e-bikes come with disc brakes, either hydraulic or mechanical. But on this lightweight bike, only 33 pounds, the calipers have done a really awesome job. Overall, we've been really impressed with how the Roadster's performed. We also really love how it looks. Ride1UP has obviously spent a lot of time thinking about how this thing is styled. And we think it's done a great job of taking its cues from the messenger and fixie culture that we see popular around the United States right now. The Roadster has a short wheelbase and steep head tube, which gives it a really snapping handling characteristic. It goes around corners really quickly. It wants you to ride fast through corners, which is fun. Those things being said, it's also really stable. At speed, it feels very planted, it feels very predictable. The Kenda tires hook up really nicely. One thing we do feel like we need to note though is the narrowness of the handlebars. While this bike has a really snappy, really quick handling, the bars make it feel a little bit twitchy sometimes, especially at lower speeds. Once you're up to speed, it feels nice. But going slow around corners, it may feel like the steering's a little bit quick. This bike is also pretty comfortable for how aggressive it is. The narrow saddle feels nice for me, but I'm also used to riding bikes with narrower saddles. And then the contact points as well are also really stable. It's got some alloy Welgo pedals on it, which feel really nice under your feet when you're standing, when you're climbing. It all feels really solid.
We
put the Roadster through 2 range tests, one at its highest assist level and one at its lowest assist level. At the lowest assist level, it got 32.91 miles and 2 hours of life out of the battery before it ran out of charge. Our test rider did that with about a 16 mile an hour average. The highest assist level, which I did, we got 16.1 miles and just almost exactly 1 hour of ride time before it died, at a 16.1 mile an hour average. That's not too far off of what Ride1UP tells us to expect from the bike, which is a 20 to 35 mile range. It's really important to remember that this is going to change depending on your size, your height, and your weight, and even variables that you can't control, like how hilly the terrain is and the weather. So before we dive into our hill climb test, it's really worth noting that this is not a hill climbing bike. This is a single-speed city and urban commuting bike. It's made for flat surfaces, shorter hills, not really what we're about to take it up. This hill behind me is a 1/3 of a mile long. It's a 12% grade on average. It's pretty steep. We're gonna see how this thing, with its 350 watt hub motor, relatively small for the class, and relatively large gear of 64x20 does. I'm very curious though, because at 33 pounds, it's a light bike. It should theoretically go uphill fairly well. Let's see how it does. So every time we ride this hill, it's a bit of a bear. It's earned the title hellhole by us locals, and at 12% on average over a 1/3 of the mile, I think it deserves it. But as we had guessed, this relatively light e-bike went up fast, despite the fact that it only has 1 gear. I went up it in 1 minute and 16 seconds, which according to Strava, which is what we do all of our tests on, it's good for 4th place. My low speed was 8 miles an hour, which again is pretty quick, and my average speed was 14.1, which, considering 12% grade, is fast. But there is an important thing to note about that. I stood the entire time. Aside from one small section where I sat down to give myself a bit of a break, I stood, and it was kind of because I had to make the bike go even relatively quick, because it's got a big gear, 64x20. That's a lot of gear to turn over going uphill. But you gotta remember, this is not a hill climbing bike. This is not a normal circumstance for the Roadster to go up. But overall, we're really impressed. One thing that's worth noting is we didn't time it, but I did ride up this hill a second time to get cell service, and I sat the whole time. I just let the 350 watt motor do its thing, and it powered me up. It wasn't very fast, but it did the job. And I honestly thought that was impressive. This is a smaller motor for what we see on e-bikes, especially for hub motors. And it does a really, really nice job. It's torquey, gets up to speed, and it gets the job done. So here at EBR, we've devised a new test for some of our e-bikes that we're starting with this one, and that's the circuit test. What we're doing is we've plotted out about 1 mile course that has no stops, very few impediments, and we tried the bike in each of its different assist levels, starting with no assist all the way up to assist level 5 if the bike has it. This bike performed pretty well, kind of exactly how we expected it to. And no assist, and I'm gonna reference my phone here to not screw anything up, on no assist over our 1 mile course, it did average 13.6 miles an hour. On PIS 1, it was 16.2. On 2, 17.1. Assist level 3 was 18.7. Assist level 4 was 19.8. And assist level 5 was 20.6. So again, kind of right at that happy place that I'd referenced before they had got, about 20.5 miles an hour, and I did that test, so it's pretty spot on. What this shows is the differences between each of the PIS levels. Something we found on other bikes we've tested is that there's really not much of a difference. It just gets up to the top speed a little bit faster or a little bit slower. The Roadster, however, has a really nice differentiation between each of its PIS levels. And on this bike, we found a pretty good difference between each one, about a mile on average, if not more. So to test the brakes of the Roadster, we came out to our local parking lot and set up cones in 5 feet increments. What I'm gonna do is put the bike on PAS level 5, take it up to max speed, and when I hit the first cone, I'm gonna jam on the brakes as hard as I can, and since I'm a mountain biker, I'm probably gonna throw my weight far back and try to get the thing to stop fast. This bike is equipped with caliper rim brakes. So these are the type of brakes that clamp down on the rim. They're not disc brakes, so we're not too sure how they're gonna perform. Traditionally, disc brakes grab a little bit harder and stop the bike quick, but this type of brake have been used on road racing bikes for a long, long time, so they should be fine, especially on this lighter bike. Again, only 33 pounds. We'll see how it goes. So this bike performed pretty well on our brake test. Out of an average of 5 times of me jamming on the brakes from full speed, it came to a stop on average in 17 feet and 4 inches, which, considering this bike has caliper brakes and not disc brakes, that's a pretty good result. The Rad Mission we tested in December, for example, which we view as one of this bike's biggest competitors, it came to a stop in 15 feet and 4 inches, but bear in mind that that bike comes with mechanical disc brakes. So if you're looking at this bike, and maybe the fact that it comes with caliper brakes and not disc brakes is a hang-up, I wouldn't put too much money into that, because our difference between the 2 brake sets on 2 comparable bikes is less than 2 feet. This thing stops quick. Overall, we believe that Ride1UP did a really great job with the Roadster. The company set out to build a no-nonsense, budget, streamlined, great-looking commuter bike, and we think they nailed it. We've had a bunch of different testers on this bike over the 100 or so miles that we've ridden it over the past few weeks that we've had it, and everyone's really kind of come back with a smile on their face. We like the fact that it's got a belt drive drivetrain, which is pretty unique at this price point. We're happy with the fact that the 350 watt motor seems to do a really good job of powering people of all different body shapes and sizes. Though the battery range is modest, we feel that they did a really good job of fitting a pretty small battery into a frame that doesn't give it a lot of space. On top of that, the brakes perform very well. It's just a really nice and fun handling bike. We feel like the perfect buyer for something like this is a person who lives in an urban environment, something that's dense with a lot of traffic, who's not necessarily covering a long distance every day, but just wants to get there fast. This bike is going to be great for that. It's also not going to be something that draws a lot of attention when it's locked up on a bike rack, which, if you've spent money on an e-bike, you're probably worried about someone stealing it. A general rule of thumb with a commuter bike is you don't want something super flashy, so if you lock it up to a rack, no one's going to take a pair of bolt cutters and walk away with it. We don't think you're going to run that risk with this bike, and that's a good thing. If you've liked this video, be sure to like it and subscribe if you haven't already. If you want to read more in-depth review, we've written a review that's posted to our website, and you can find that link below. And if you have something to add to the conversation, give us a comment. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next ride.